My parents sent me to an orphanage, and when I built my own career, they came to demand money. I'm here to share my story, and it's a long one, filled with twists and turns that I never saw coming. Growing up was anything but easy, and even now, as an adult, I'm still trying to piece together everything that happened to me. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and settle in, because this is going to be quite a ride. I was born in a small town in the Midwest. My earliest memories are of a cold, sterile orphanage. The place was bleak and unwelcoming, the kind of place where the walls seemed to absorb the screams and cries of children rather than reflect them. I was one of those kids, always crying, always scared. My name is Jake, by the way. Jake Harper. I was abandoned at birth, left on the steps of a hospital with nothing but a blanket and a note saying my name. The orphanage was a harsh environment. The other kids weren't exactly friendly, and the caregivers were more like wardens than nurturing figures. I quickly learned that showing any sign of weakness was a mistake. The older kids would pounce on it, bullying and tormenting those who couldn't defend themselves. I was small for my age, and an easy target. They'd push me around, call me names, and sometimes even take my food. The adults didn't care. To them, we were just a bunch of unwanted children, and our suffering was none of their concern. When I was 8, I was finally adopted by a couple who at first seemed like a beacon of hope. The Harpers were an older couple, unable to have children of their own. When they first visited the orphanage, they seemed kind, showering me with attention and promises of a better life. I remember clinging to those promises, hoping that my days of being tormented were over. But once I moved into their home, the facade quickly faded. The Harpers were strict, cold, and distant. They'd adopted me not out of love or compassion, but because they needed someone to take care of their large, old house and garden. They made it clear that I was there to work, not to be part of their family. If I ever stepped out of line, the punishments were severe. Missed a spot while cleaning? No dinner for me. Forgot to water the plants? Locked in my room for the night. School wasn't any better. The kids at school seemed to sense that I was different, that I didn't have a loving family to go home to. They bullied me relentlessly. They'd knock my books out of my hands, make fun of my worn-out clothes, and call me names. I tried to ignore them, to focus on my studies, but it was hard. The teachers, much like the caregivers at the orphanage, didn't seem to care. To them, I was just another troubled kid from a broken home. Despite everything, I managed to do well academically. Books became my escape, my sanctuary from the harsh realities of my life. I would spend hours in the library, reading about far-off places and people who overcame insurmountable odds. I dreamed of one day escaping my situation, of going to college and making a better life for myself. When I finally graduated high school, I was accepted into a state university on a scholarship. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the pain and suffering of my past. But university life was a different kind of challenge. I was on my own for the first time without any support system. I had to work multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet, all while keeping up with my studies. My freshman year was a blur of exhaustion and stress. I barely slept, constantly juggling work and school. I tried to make friends, but it was hard to connect with people when I was always so tired and worried about money. I felt like an outsider, just like I had in high school. One of the part-time jobs I took was at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The owner, Mr. Thompson, was a gruff but kind man. He knew I was struggling and often let me take home leftovers. I was grateful for his kindness, but the other staff members weren't so understanding. They saw me as competition for hours and tips and often made my shifts difficult. Then, there was Sarah. She was a junior and one of the few people who tried to befriend me. We met in the library, both reaching for the same book. She laughed, a light, melodic sound that made me smile despite myself. We started studying together, and for a while things seemed to be looking up, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. One night, while walking back to my dorm from the diner, I was mugged. A group of guys cornered me, demanding my wallet. When I hesitated, one of them pulled a knife. I handed over what little money I had, and they ran off, leaving me shaken and bruised. I reported it to the campus police, but nothing ever came of it. It was just another reminder that I was on my own. Sarah tried to help me, but there was only so much she could do. I didn't want to burden her with my problems. She had her own life, her own struggles. I didn't want to be just another thing she had to worry about. So I put up walls, pushing her away even as I longed for her companionship. As the semesters went by, things went from bad to worse. My grades started to slip, and I found it harder and harder to keep up with my coursework. The constant stress and lack of sleep were taking their toll. I felt like I was drowning, and there was no one to throw me a lifeline. One particularly rough night, after a long shift at the diner and an even longer study session, I collapsed in my dorm room. I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by beeping machines and sterile white walls. The doctors said it was exhaustion and stress, but I knew it was more than that. It was the weight of my entire life crashing down on me. Sarah visited me in the hospital, her eyes filled with worry. She held my hand and told me everything would be okay, but I couldn't believe her. How could anything be okay when my whole life had been nothing but pain and struggle? I pushed her away again, telling her I didn't need her pity. When I was released from the hospital, I was more determined than ever to turn my life around. I threw myself into my studies, working even harder to catch up. But the harder I worked, the more I seemed to fall behind. It was like trying to climb a mountain with no summit in sight. Then one day, everything changed. I was called into the dean's office, my heart pounding in my chest. I feared the worst, thinking I was going to be expelled for my slipping grades. But instead, the dean told me I had been selected for a prestigious internship. It was a chance to work with one of the top companies in my field, a golden opportunity that could change my life. I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, something good was happening to me. I accepted the internship, determined to make the most of it. The company, Stanton Industries, was a powerhouse in the tech world. Working there was a dream come true, and I threw myself into the work with everything I had. The internship was demanding, but I thrived under the pressure. For the first time, I felt like I was part of something important, something bigger than myself. I made connections, learned valuable skills, and started to see a future for myself beyond the pain and struggle. But life, as always, had other plans. One day, while working late on a project, I received a call from Sarah. She was crying, her voice barely recognizable. She told me she had been in an accident and needed my help. I rushed to the hospital, my heart in my throat. Sarah was in bad shape. She had been hit by a drunk driver and had suffered multiple injuries. Seeing her like that, so vulnerable and in pain, broke something inside me. All the walls I had built came crashing down, and I realized how much I cared for her. I spent every moment I could by her side, helping her through her recovery. It was a long, painful process, but Sarah was strong. She fought through the pain and slowly started to heal. In those moments, I realized that I wasn't as alone as I had always thought. Sarah had been there for me even when I tried to push her away. As Sarah healed, our bond grew stronger. We became inseparable, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly happy. The internship was going well, and my grades had improved. It seemed like everything was finally falling into place. But then, the unthinkable happened. One night, while working late at Stanton Industries, I discovered something that would change everything. I stumbled upon documents that revealed the company was involved in illegal activities. They were cutting corners, putting people's lives at risk to save money. I didn't know what to do. I was just an intern, but I couldn't ignore what I had found. I gathered as much evidence as I could and went to the authorities. It was a risky move, but I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. The fallout was immediate. The company tried to discredit me, painting me as a disgruntled employee trying to stir up trouble, but the evidence was undeniable, and eventually, the truth came out. Stanton Industries faced massive fines, and several top executives were arrested. I lost my internship and any chance of working in the tech industry again. But I knew I had done the right thing. Sarah stood by me through it all, and together, we faced the uncertainty of the future. We graduated college, and despite the challenges, I managed to find a job in a smaller tech firm. It wasn't as prestigious as Stanton Industries, but it was honest work. Sarah and I moved in together, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a real home. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. We had each other, and that was enough. The past still haunted me, but I was learning to let go, to focus on the present and the future. Sarah and I talked about starting a family, building a life together. It seemed like all the pain and struggle had finally led me to a place of peace. But life, as always, had one more twist in store. One night, Sarah and I were walking home from dinner when we were attacked. A group of men jumped us, demanding our money. When I resisted, one of them pulled out a gun. There was a struggle, a flash, and then pain like I had never known. I woke up in the hospital, the familiar sterile white walls surrounding me. Sarah was there, holding my hand, tears streaming down her face. I had been shot, but I would survive. The men were caught, and justice was served. But the incident left a mark on me, a reminder that life is fragile and unpredictable. Thanks for all the support and kind words after my last post. It means a lot to me that so many people took the time to read my story and share their thoughts. I'm back with more updates, and, as usual, life has continued to be anything but straightforward. Let me pick up where I left off. After that harrowing incident where Sarah and I were attacked, life began to slowly piece itself back together. Recovery was slow and painful, but Sarah was my rock through it all. Her strength gave me the will to keep pushing forward. It was in those trying times that I realized just how much she meant to me. She wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my partner, my confidant, my everything. We started to go out on dates again, savoring the little moments of joy that life offered. We would take long walks in the park, visit museums, and sometimes just sit in a cozy cafe, talking about our dreams and plans for the future. Every day with Sarah felt like a gift, a reminder that even after the darkest storms, there could be beautiful, clear skies. As I healed, both physically and emotionally, I decided it was time to take a big step. On a crisp autumn evening, under a canopy of golden leaves, I proposed to Sarah. Her eyes filled with tears of joy as she said yes, and in that moment, all the pain and hardship of the past seemed to melt away. We were engaged, and nothing else mattered. The months leading up to our wedding were a whirlwind of planning and excitement. We decided to keep things simple, a small ceremony with close friends and family. It was the happiest day of my life, standing there with Sarah, promising to love and cherish her for the rest of my days. We danced, laughed, and celebrated late into the night, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. Our honeymoon was a blissful escape from reality. We traveled to Italy, exploring the ancient streets of Rome, the romantic canals of Venice, and the breathtaking cliffs of the Amalfi Coast. It was a dream come true, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was living a fairy tale. But, as life often does, it wasn't long before reality came crashing back in. When we returned home, I received a call from an old friend from college, Mark. He had heard about my ordeal with Stanton Industries and wanted to catch up. We met for coffee, and it was like no time had passed. Mark had always been a straight shooter, someone I could trust, or so I thought. Mark told me about an incredible job opportunity at a new tech startup he was involved with. The company, Vertex Dynamics, was on the cutting edge of AI technology, and they were looking for someone with my skill set. It seemed like the perfect chance to get my career back on track, and I was eager to learn more. I met with the team at Vertex Dynamics, and I was impressed by their vision and innovation. They were developing a revolutionary AI system that could change the world, and they wanted me to be a part of it. The salary was generous, and the benefits were top-notch. It all seemed too good to be true, but Mark vouched for them, and I trusted him. I took the job, and for a while everything was perfect. The work was challenging and fulfilling, and I was surrounded by brilliant minds who shared my passion for technology. Sarah was supportive, happy to see me excited about my career again. We moved into a new apartment, a cozy place that felt like home from the moment we stepped inside. But as the months went by, I started to notice some oddities at Vertex Dynamics. There were whispers among the staff, hushed conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered the room. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the nature of a high-pressure environment. But the nagging feeling that something was off wouldn't go away. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I was approached by a colleague named Lisa. She was a software engineer, sharp and observant. Lisa had been with the company longer than I had, and we had developed a good rapport. She looked nervous as she pulled me aside and told me she had something important to discuss. Lisa revealed that she had stumbled upon some troubling information. She had been working on a project related to data security when she discovered that Vertex Dynamics was involved in some questionable practices. They were collecting and selling user data without consent, and the AI system we were developing was being used for surveillance purposes by undisclosed clients. My heart sank as she showed me the evidence. It was clear and damning. I felt a sense of déjà vu, a reminder of what had happened at Stanton Industries. But this time it was worse. I was deeply embedded in the company, and my reputation was on the line. I knew I had to do something, but the stakes were higher now. I had Sarah to think about, our future together. I took the evidence to Mark, hoping he could provide some clarity. To my shock, he brushed it off, insisting that Lisa was mistaken and that I should ignore her. He assured me that everything was above board and that I shouldn't worry, but his dismissive attitude only fueled my suspicions. I decided to dig deeper on my own. Late at night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I would pore over company documents and emails looking for more proof. What I found was worse than I had imagined. Vertex Dynamics was not only selling data, but also manipulating information to influence political events and social movements. They were playing a dangerous game, and I was a pawn in it. I confided in Sarah, telling her everything. She was understandably worried, but stood by me, encouraging me to do what I thought was right. Together, we made a plan. I gathered all the evidence I could find, knowing that exposing the truth would put us both at risk. One night, as I was copying files onto a secure drive, I heard a noise outside our apartment. I looked out the window and saw a car parked across the street, its occupants watching our building. My heart raced as I realized we were being surveilled. I quickly finished copying the files and hid the drive. The next day, I went to the authorities, just as I had done with Stanton Industries. The investigation was swift and the fallout was immediate. Vertex Dynamics was shut down and several top executives, including Mark, were arrested. It turned out that Mark had known about the illegal activities all along. He had lied to me, used our friendship to get me on board and keep me quiet. I was devastated. Not only had I lost my job, but I had also lost a friend. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. The betrayal cut deep, and for a while I was lost, unsure of what to do next. Sarah and I decided to take some time away from everything. We rented a cabin in the mountains, far from the chaos of the city. The fresh air and tranquility were a balm to our wounded souls. We spent our days hiking, reading, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was a much-needed respite, a chance to heal and reflect. During one of our hikes, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. It was run down, but there was something charming about it. Sarah and I spent the afternoon exploring the cabin and its surroundings. We talked about what it would be like to fix it up, to turn it into a getaway spot for ourselves and future generations. The idea sparked something in us, a new dream to chase. We decided to buy the cabin and spent the next few months renovating it. It was hard work, but it was also incredibly rewarding. We poured our hearts into that cabin, making it a reflection of our love and resilience. By the time we were finished, it felt like a new beginning, a symbol of the life we wanted to build together. With the cabin project complete, I started to think about my career again. I knew I wanted to stay in the tech industry, but I was wary of big corporations. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would make a positive impact. After much thought and discussion with Sarah, I decided to start my own company, a tech firm focused on ethical AI development. It was a daunting task, but I was determined. I reached out to former colleagues and mentors, gathering a team of like-minded individuals who shared my vision. We started small, working out of a shared office space, but the passion and dedication of my team were palpable. We were united by a common goal to create technology that would benefit society without compromising on ethics. The early days of the company were challenging. We faced numerous obstacles, from securing funding to developing our first product. But slowly, things began to fall into place. We launched our first AI-driven platform designed to help nonprofits and social enterprises optimize their operations. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and our client base grew steadily. As the company flourished, so did my relationship with Sarah. We faced many challenges together, but each one only made us stronger. We celebrated our successes and supported each other through the tough times. Sarah became my partner in every sense of the word, helping with the business and always offering a shoulder to lean on. One day, while going through some old files, I stumbled upon an email from someone I hadn't heard from in years, my adoptive parents, the Harpers. They had found out about my company and wanted to reconnect. I was taken aback. After everything they had put me through, I wasn't sure I wanted to reopen that chapter of my life. But Sarah encouraged me to hear them out, to see if they had changed. I agreed to meet them, cautiously hopeful. When we sat down together, I could see the years had softened them. They apologized for the way they had treated me, admitting they had been wrong. They wanted to make amends, to be a part of my life again. It was a difficult decision, but I chose to give them a chance. People can change, and I was willing to see if they truly had. Reconnecting with my adoptive parents was a slow process. There were years of hurt and mistrust to overcome, but gradually, we began to rebuild our relationship. They were supportive of my company and genuinely interested in my life. It wasn't easy, but it felt good to let go of some of the anger I had been carrying for so long. As life continued to move forward, Sarah and I faced another unexpected challenge. We had been trying to start a family, but after several months with no success, we decided to see a specialist. The news was heartbreaking. We had fertility issues, and our chances of conceiving naturally were slim. The news hit us hard, but we were determined not to let it define us. We explored various options, from fertility treatments to adoption. It was a roller coaster of emotions, but through it all, we had each other. Eventually, we decided to adopt, wanting to give a child a loving home, just as I had once hoped for. The adoption process was long and arduous, filled with paperwork, interviews, and waiting. But finally, we were matched with a beautiful baby girl. Holding her in my arms for the first time was a moment I'll never forget. It was like all the pain and struggle had led to this one perfect moment. We named her Grace, and she became the light of our lives. Parenthood was a new adventure, filled with sleepless nights and endless joy. Watching Grace grow and discover the world was a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. No matter how difficult the journey, there is always hope, always a chance for happiness. I'm back again with another update on my life. Thank you all for your continued support and encouragement. It's been a wild ride, and it seems like the twists and turns just keep coming. What I'm about to share has been one of the most harrowing experiences of my life, but it also showed me just how strong I can be. So, let's dive in. Life had settled into a new rhythm. Sarah and I were happy, raising our beautiful daughter Grace, and my tech firm was thriving. It felt like we had finally found our stride, that elusive balance between work, family, and personal fulfillment. But, as fate would have it, peace is often temporary. It all started with a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I usually ignore unknown numbers, but something compelled me to pick up. On the other end was a voice I hadn't heard in decades, my biological mother, Eleanor. The shock was so intense I almost dropped the phone. She sounded hesitant, almost timid, but there was a sharp edge to her voice that I couldn't ignore. Eleanor explained that she had found me through some mutual acquaintances. She wanted to meet and talk about important family matters. Against my better judgment, I agreed. A part of me was curious, desperate even, to understand why she had abandoned me all those years ago. We met in a small, nondescript cafe. Eleanor was a shadow of the woman I remembered, her face lined with years of hardship and regret. She wasn't alone. My biological father, Martin, was with her. He looked just as worn down, but his eyes held a coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. The meeting started with pleasantries, but it quickly became clear they had an agenda. Eleanor and Martin had fallen on hard times. They were in debt and struggling to make ends meet. They hinted, not so subtly, that since I was now successful, it was my duty to help them out. The conversation made my skin crawl. They had abandoned me, and now they were back, demanding money as if they were entitled to it. I left the cafe feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. Sarah was waiting for me at home, and when I told her about the meeting, she was furious. She couldn't believe their audacity, and honestly, neither could I. We decided to ignore them, hoping they would go away. But they didn't. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor and Martin's calls and messages became more frequent and more desperate. When it became clear that I wasn't going to hand over any money, their tone shifted from pleading to threatening. They said they knew things about me. Things that could ruin my reputation and my business. It was blackmail, plain and simple. I refused to give in to their demands, but the stress was taking its toll. Sarah and I were constantly on edge, and it was affecting our relationship and our ability to parent Grace. I reached out to a lawyer, seeking advice on how to handle the situation. My lawyer, Jessica, was a sharp, non-nonsense woman who assured me we had a strong case if it came to that. The threats continued to escalate. One evening, I came home to find a threatening letter taped to our front door. It was the final straw. I decided to file a restraining order against Eleanor and Martin. Jessica guided me through the process, and we were granted a temporary restraining order. But it didn't stop them. They continued to harass us, using different phone numbers and fake social media accounts. The breaking point came when they showed up at our house one night, banging on the door and shouting. I called the police and they were taken away, but the damage was done. Sarah and I felt violated, our sense of safety shattered. We knew we had to take stronger action. Jessica advised us to take the matter to court. We filed a lawsuit for harassment and attempted extortion. The court date was set, and I knew it was going to be a long, grueling process. But I was determined to protect my family and stand up to the people who had caused me so much pain. The courtroom was intimidating. Eleanor and Martin had hired a lawyer, a slick, greasy man named Victor. He tried to paint me as an ungrateful son, turning my back on my struggling parents. But Jessica was prepared. She presented evidence of their threats and harassment, painting a clear picture of their attempts to extort money from me. The trial lasted for weeks. It was emotionally draining, and the constant stress was taking a toll on my health. Sarah was my rock, attending every session, holding my hand and reassuring me that we would get through this. Grace was too young to understand what was happening, but she sensed the tension and would often cling to me, asking if everything was okay. There were moments when I doubted myself, when Victor's accusations made me question if I was doing the right thing. But every time I looked at Sarah and Grace, I knew I had to keep fighting. This wasn't just about money, it was about standing up to the people who had hurt me and ensuring they couldn't hurt my family. One of the most shocking moments came when Eleanor took the stand. She tried to evoke sympathy, talking about her hardships and how she had regretted giving me up. But under cross-examination, Jessica revealed inconsistencies in her story. It became clear that Eleanor and Martin were not the victims they claimed to be. They had made their choices, and now they were trying to manipulate me into solving their problems. The turning point in the trial came when Jessica presented evidence of Martin's criminal record. He had a history of fraud and extortion, something he had tried to keep hidden. The revelation stunned the courtroom and shattered any remaining credibility they had. It was clear to everyone that their intentions were far from noble. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was only a few hours. When they returned with a verdict in our favor, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The court granted us a permanent restraining order against Eleanor and Martin and ordered them to cease all contact with us. They were also required to pay legal fees, which was a small but significant victory. After the trial, life began to return to normal. Sarah and I focused on rebuilding our sense of safety and normalcy for Grace. We installed a security system in our home, and I made sure to check in with Jessica regularly to ensure we were taking all necessary precautions. The experience had left scars, but it had also strengthened our resolve as a family. We were closer than ever, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose in my work. My tech firm continued to grow, and we expanded our focus on developing ethical AI solutions. It was rewarding to know that our work was making a positive impact, and it helped me find some peace after the turmoil we had faced. In the months that followed, I received messages of support from friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had heard about our ordeal. It was heartening to know that we weren't alone, that there were good people out there who cared. But the shadows of the past have a way of lingering. One day I received a letter in the mail. It was from Eleanor. She wrote to apologize for everything that had happened, claiming that Martin had coerced her into going along with his schemes. She said she genuinely wanted to make amends and asked for a chance to prove it. I read the letter several times, trying to make sense of my emotions. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her the chance she was asking for, but another part of me was wary, remembering the pain and betrayal. I talked it over with Sarah, who, ever the voice of reason, suggested that I take my time to decide. In the end, I chose to respond, but cautiously. I wrote back, setting clear boundaries and expressing my need for time and space. Eleanor's response was surprisingly understanding. She said she respected my decision and would wait as long as it took. It was a small step towards healing, but I knew it would take time to rebuild any semblance of trust. Life continued, as it always does. Grace was growing up fast, a bright and curious child who brought endless joy to our lives. Sarah and I cherished every moment, grateful for the family we had built. We took more trips to the cabin, finding solace in the quiet beauty of nature. My company flourished, and we launched several successful projects. We partnered with nonprofits and educational institutions, using our technology to make a difference. It was fulfilling work, and it helped me find a sense of purpose that I had longed for. As I look back on this chapter of my life, I see a journey marked by pain, betrayal, and hardship. But I also see resilience, love, and growth. The legal battle with Eleanor and Martin was a dark and difficult time, but it taught me the importance of standing up for myself and my family. It reminded me of the strength we have when we stand together and the power of love and support.